Date with a Debut is recorded and produced on Awabakal country. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Welcome to Date with a Debut, a podcast about debut authors, their incredible books, and their journeys to publication. If you are looking for a new author to discover or writing inspiration for your own story and you don't know where to start, this is the place to be. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm delighted to welcome another debut author in today's episode. You can find any books mentioned in today's podcast down in the description. We will discuss mild spoilers ahead, so I recommend you grab yourself a copy of the book now, or at least very soon. Wherever you are listening, thank you for listening with us and supporting the Australian book industry, and if you enjoy the show, hit us with a review, a rating, or a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. Lastly, this episode is brought to you by Podpixels, the ultimate storytelling tool for passionate podcasters. More on them later in the show. So firstly, welcome one and all to Date with a Debut live at the 2026 Newcastle Writers Festival. I'm Nick Wasiliev, host of the show, and I'm very, very excited to welcome you here for what's actually the official launch of the new season of the podcast here in the beautiful Hunter. Before we begin, myself along with the authors alongside me and the Newcastle Writers Festival acknowledges that we meet on unceded country, the lands of the Awabakal and the Warramai peoples. We recognise and respect their cultural heritage, beliefs and continuing relationship with the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present, and for any Aboriginal people who join us today, we welcome you warmly. Some housekeeping before we dive into the session. Firstly, I ask that all phones be switched to silent while we are in session. But when you're out of the session and you're on the socials, be loud then. Let the festival know that you're here. We are elated that you are here. So you can search Newcastle Writers Festival on Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and use the hashtag NWF2026. So lastly, if you have any questions, I'm assuming there'll be a lot of aspiring writers or any people who want to ask those questions, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. And then once this session is concluded, you'll have the chance to also meet these incredible authors at a special book signing, which is near the festival bookshop. So for anyone who is unfamiliar, the basis of this crazy podcast has kind of come to the idea of committing yourself to writing a book. Everyone who writes a book gets started somewhere. How does one publish their first novel? What are some of the things that you have to navigate in the publishing world? And how does one learn the craft of telling stories? So this event is not just for authors and their incredible debuts, but their journey to publication and the lessons they learn. And I am delighted to welcome three amazing authors to discuss this for the next hour today. So let's meet them. First up at the far end is Alejandra Martinez, an Australian Uruguayan writer and playwright based in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. Her work has been performed at the Riverside Theatre in Parramatta, and she's been published in a range of anthologies and magazines, including Best Australian Stories and Girl Talk, to name a few. Her debut that we will discuss today is Salsa in the Suburbs, published by Hunter Publishing Group, Puncher and Wattmann, with an extract of the book actually being the winner of the 2022 Newcastle Writers Festival Fresh Ink Emerging Writer Prize. Yeah, I reckon that deserves applause. The lovely gentleman in the middle is Sam Elliott. He's a Sydney-based writer and interviewer, and for those of you who love your writing podcasts, as I do, Sam is the founder and host of the Right Way podcast, a show dedicated to examining the creative process, featuring dozens of outstanding creative guests at every stage of their careers. I'm a long-time listener, and I highly recommend that you check it out. He's also a kick-ass crime writer now, and we'll discuss his intense crime debut, Haze, published by Macmillan Australia. Give him a welcome as well. And lastly, the author directly to my right, Emma Pei Yin, an Australian Chinese writer, editor, literary advocate, and fellow Dashound owner. Among her many achievements, she is the founder of Yinfluence, an agency supporting people of colour, queer and neurodivergent writers. And she also co-hosts a podcast, Served with Rice, which centres conversations around books, publishing, identity and community through food-infused discussion. Her debut, When Sleeping Women Wake, is published by Hachette Australia and has been on the awards trail the last couple of weeks, being longlisted for the ARA Historical Novel Prize, and just this week won at the Australian Indie Book Awards in the debut fiction category. I think that deserves a round of applause. Needless to say, we've got a panel on our hands, so thank you so much for being here and supporting the festival. And I like to start every podcast by doing a deep dive into every book before we talk about the journey to publication. It's a good chance to allow every book the time to shine. And Alejandra, I'd love to start with you. At the start of the podcast, I like the classic elevator pitch. I'm in the lift, I'm going up. What is Salsa in the Suburbs about?
Hi, thank you, Nick. Salsa in the Suburbs is basically a family drama of a family who have migrated from South America, from Uruguay. They left South America because there was a civic military dictatorship at the time, and the family are finding their place in Australia. So the book takes place, a lot of the story takes place decades later, when the father, his wife has died, he's grieving, he's very dependent on his daughters, and one of them, who's very pragmatic, puts an ad in the paper to find him a partner. So then that takes them on a journey about where their place is, their own prejudices, and finding who they really are and how they relate to Australian society as well.
This is a really wonderful book for anyone who isn't familiar. It examines grief, it examines culture, and a beautiful relationship between siblings and a father. Given the nature of the podcast, you have to be as quick as possible. If I could sum it up in 2 words, this book is about belonging and it is about identity. Each character struggles with both of those issues in their own way. Lola, she's one of these siblings, very connected to her heritage, views Uruguay as a place of love and security. She's married a Uruguayan man, has been a dutiful mother, has done everything right, to use quotation marks, and yet she is someone filled with anxiety and struggle. Betty's the opposite. Her sister has cast off her heritage, lives a different, distinct lifestyle, and then of course Juan, the father, who at the start of this novel, his life is coloured by the grief and the loss of his longtime wife. He is such a practical soul. He's pragmatic, he's direct, often to a fault. Tell me about examining identity in this book.
I think what I wanted to do with identity in this book, look at it across various things. I mean, we're defined by who we are, by economic, social, cultural issues, and this is very much a story of working class migrants in Australia, which is different because we do get diverse stories around middle class migrants, but the story for its working class migrants is a very different story. The way they manage the society and communicate, they're very much their identity from the Juan, who's the older man. He belongs to what I would call, in the words of Paulo Freire, the culture of silence. So he doesn't have a voice in Australia, and that determines his identity a lot. He is like the other, he's marginalised, whereas his daughters have more of a foot in society, but they need to find their identity within the two cultures and to also be able to navigate who are they within their relationships, within their family as well, and what it means to carry those two cultures. And because when we do come from, we grow up coming from a culture that doesn't speak English, we're always moving in and out of those worlds. Like you're often at home, you speak one language. When you leave, okay, you're leaving, leave your language, leave your culture, and then you're moving in the Australian world. And often parents that don't speak English, that come from a working class background, the children are the eyes, the voice, they're the interpreters. And I think in my story, it's looking for identity beyond that. Like one of the characters is really looking at, she rejects that because it carries a lot of burden, it carries a lot of trauma. So she's decided she's a hippie living in Mullumbimby, and she even rejects, like, food is a really big part of identity as well. And she rejects the big meat-eating diet that Uruguayans have, or which we grew up on, lots of meat. A salad is a lettuce. That is a salad, is a lettuce. If you want a mixed salad, you can add tomato to it. Okay.
I will say there's also a really nice touch. This book kind of bounces back and forth between these three characters really beautifully, and a really nice touch that you do. Every chapter is told from a different perspective in this triangle of this family. But you start each chapter differently based on each person. So for Betty, the hippie who has cast off this identity, she's someone who loves to create crafts and soaps and oils, and every chapter starts off with an ingredients list of what she is focusing on for soap and oils. By comparison, her father, Juan, he starts off with poems in both Spanish and English. And then Lola, who is a character I personally really gravitated towards, she starts off with journal entries. She has a journal that she's writing in about all of her struggles and her anxiety. And it fits each character so well. It tells so much about the character, their practicalities. How did you actually get to that point of using that as an identity point for each of those characters?
First, it was a little bit of an idea, but I do have to say thank you to a mentor that I had who did suggest that maybe starting with something like that would be an interesting way of looking at it. And then I developed it, and I thought for Juan, he's at the beginning of each chapter there's a tango, so a really old tangos some of them are from the 1930s. So he's because Uruguay is a very nostalgic culture as well, and he represents that generation and that nostalgia. And I don't know if you know much about tango and all that sort of music, but it's a very nostalgic sort of music, and the words are very nostalgic. So that was Juan. And then we have Lola. Lola suffers from anxiety, a mental illness. Lola's character is largely based on myself. I have an anxiety disorder, which, by the way, that's why it took a long time to get published too. It's another story. Anyway, so what I've said about Lola is she has a journal. So the journal for her is like working out, okay, who am I? What am I doing? Like, put it on paper, like try and understand it in some way by writing it down, because writing does help to interpret your thoughts and how you think and how you look at the world. And then for Betty, for her, it's the making the soaps, the making the oils. That's who she is, because she's moving away from a lot of her culture. But by making these things, she's connecting, she's more grounded. So it's a manual thing as well. So getting out of your head and being grounded, and that's really important for her.
It's such a great use, such a great tool in terms of a writing perspective. Sam.
Hello.
Pivoting over to pivoting over to an intense, brutal Australian crime thriller. I devoured Haze. I've seen it everywhere I've gone. It's a stunning book. Elevator pitch time. What is Haze about?
Okay, elevator pitch. Okay, so it's set in a fictional South Coast town on the coast of New South Wales, South Coast New South Wales town, besieged by an unprecedented bushfire season. We meet Constable Dahlia Turner in the opening pages. She is conducting door knocks on properties on the outskirts of town, properties that are supposed to have been kind of evacuated a day or so beforehand. The last name on her list is her two best friends and their son, Jude, who lived on a property there. So she goes to investigate that, finds that their best friends, have been killed, and Jude is missing right before the fire kind of sweeps through, consumes the house, and Dahlia escapes in a way that I sort of won't tell you to spoil how she escapes and survives. And the next day, obviously, despite being very personally involved in this, given that Jude is her godson, she wants to contribute to the search for Jude, but can't do so. So she's kind of appointed a glorified babysitter to a inspector that comes from another case that's kind of exiled from another case of another missing boy, Detective Florence Fowler. And then as this kind of increasingly becomes apparent that the disappearance of Jude and the murder of his parents might be related to the ongoing war that's happening with the two factions in town. So there is a sort of town industrialist that kind of comes from a dynastic family. Hunter Rochford, obscenely rich, kind of owns the town, and he is clashing with the leader of the cult that lives in a heavily fortified compound on the outskirts of town. Fairchild Shaw is the matriarchal leader of this cult, and they sort of worship fire, the people's cleansing light, and that is also a cult that Dahlia was spent her childhood in as well. So that's the elevator pitch. There's a few things going on.
I will say this, and I'm only going to use this as a bad pun.
Okay,
once.
please do. Fire away.
This is a brilliant, pardon the pun, slow burn. It's a groaner. I'm sorry. It's a groaner. But as someone, all jokes aside, as someone who has actually been in the position of having to defend a house from a fire, one of the things you capture brilliantly is the dread. There is a dread across this book. There is an anticipation. You feel like you are surrounded on all fronts. Throw in this powerful family that you mentioned in the Rockfords who have kind of a stranglehold on this town, and then this cult in Cleansing Light. When I first saw this cult, it made me, hearing about the intricacies and details of this cult, you did your research on it, and it immediately made me think of The Family in the Dandenong Ranges in Victoria, a real cult in the 60s. But you surround this with a brilliant character who, we were talking about, believe is the basis for this kind of a new series in Constable Dahlia Turner. Tell me about the work you put into her specifically, because without her, she's the lens to see this town, and it's very intricate and detailed in part of her past.
Bless you. First of all, I mean, there was thick and fast for the compliments there, so thank you very much, because it's I'm one of those people that always has the self-doubt sort of sitting on my shoulder like a parrot, with a parrot, so thank you so much, Nick, for that. In terms of Dahlia, I think that the characters always draw me and interest me the most as not just an anti-hero, but someone who has a tendency to make a lot of mistakes. God forbid, I've made a few mistakes in my life as well, so maybe that's why my characters do as well. In terms of Dahlia, I wanted this person that was kind of larger than life, physically and metaphorically, so it was a person that was physically imposing, which is kind of in direct contradiction to a lot of female detectives that you see in sort of stories in which they're kind of slender and vulnerable and sort of depicted in such a way as they might be brilliant but they're damaged, and just a sort of sex symbol and stuff like that, which I didn't want. I didn't want that. I wanted someone who was physically imposing, which was a double-edged sword, because just because you're physically imposing doesn't mean that that's not going to make you a magnet for misogyny, for various sort of bullying and vilification and all this sort of thing. But at her core, I wanted this person who was like courageous and had a lot of valor, is a lot more tough than me, the person who created her. I thought that she's a lot tougher than I am, and a lot of the characters, Dahlia herself is fictional, but a lot of the less nice, let's say, male characters are certainly people that I kind of grew up with. So I wanted a contrast of that, because I wanted someone that stood up to these people, potentially in some of the ways in which perhaps I didn't. So I mean that Dahlia is kind of there to, as delicately as I can possibly put this, conscious of the fact that I've got people in the room, fuck shit up. Like, that's kind of what I wanted her to do. And I'd like to think that she did achieve that, because, the odds increasingly become insurmountable. There's always the fire drawing in as well, and the fact that, there's the cult leader that she has history with, along with the Rochfords. It's bad from every angle for Dahlia, and yet she prevails and perseveres. So, yeah, you could probably tell that I'm a big fan of Dahlia, and kind of hope you are too.
Yeah, she's such a great lens for this story. But also, what I particularly love about this is, I mean, I knew about you from The Right Way for a very long time, but your love of crime really comes off the page in this book. This is one, if you love your Chris Hammers, if you love your Candace Fox, the immediate comparison I made, and I'm going to give you another compliment, The Dry, immediately. Oh, okay. I loved this. Yeah. Where does crime sit in the head of Sam?
It sits the mantelpiece, it's front and center. It's front and center. There's a lot of empty space around it, but right at the top there is it's front and center. I think the crime is it started off, it was the maligned sort of older brother that kind of people were like, oh, that's a bit shame job that there was people writing in crime, and I think that's had this beautiful sort of, if not renaissance, this completely new period that we've gotten into now where crime is respected, and it's because you can do so much with it. There's all these things that kind of scared me when I first got into about, conventions and all these sort of things in which, you have to have this many red herrings, you have to do this many twists and stuff. You don't. It's one of the most freeing sort of genres that you can possibly have. You can have people die, you can have plenty of people die, you can have no one die. It could be something, kids trying to find what's happened to the missing cat or something. It's just the possibilities themselves are limitless like that. And given that we're in Australia that has, potentially a little bit biased here, but I think that we have some of the best crime writers in the world, like by far.
It's true.
And the landscape itself as well. And particularly when you couple that with the natural disaster that Australia is just so susceptible to, and they're only ever getting worse, I think that's just like we might have the most arid landscapes in the world, but we have some of the most lush soil to write within the crime genre, I feel.
Yeah, and it's great that we have Dahlia now in that world. And this is a beautiful segue to talking about incredible, amazing, strong women with Emma's book. Hello, Emma. Hi. Elevator pitch time. What is When Sleeping Women Wake about?
When Sleeping Women Wake is a historical fiction novel set in 1940s Hong Kong during the Japanese occupation. And it follows the story of 3 women. We have a mother, Mingju, and her daughter Tsiang, and their beloved maid, Biyu. And so when Japan occupies Hong Kong, these 3 women are separated. The whole novel follows them just with a single thread of hope of finding one another again. And we also have the mother who joins, well, she doesn't willingly join. She ends up being a translator for a Japanese captain, and the daughter and Biyu, the maid, do dabble in a bit of resistance. Yeah.
This book, man. Oh, this book. Well, we were talking back and forth as I was finishing it, and I had a moment where I hit a particular moment. We'll keep it spoiler-free, which hit you in the gut. But I love the story of this family unit. This book is about self-identity. It's about self-determination. It's about freedom a little bit as well. Hong Kong is such an interesting place. I'm just going to say it is it's so deeply rooted in tradition and culture with mainland China, but then there's the British occupation and the British background in that, its location. It can seem contradictory at times. I have so many questions to ask you. I kind of have not hidden the fact that I have so many questions to ask you, but I want to ask a particular craft question. One of the joys of getting to do this show is learning parts of history that I didn't know about. A good example is talking with Chloe Adams about her book, The Occupation, which talked about Australia's occupation of post-World War II Japan and the impact that had, which was a part of history that I was never taught. You dive deep into the life of British-occupied Hong Kong and then what happens with Japanese-occupied Hong Kong. You dive into your own family history with this book as well. I imagine the research for this book must have been so fascinating to dive into.
The research was, this book took over 10 years to finish, and there were so many different drafts. I actually never wrote this book to be published. I was writing a YA novel to be published, and that got fully rejected. But anyway, that's another panel. So with this novel, it was like I was constantly going back to it over 10 years and writing, and what's your question? I totally forgot.
That's fine.
Because you know why? I was thinking about what you said about Hong Kong being so layered and stuff, and I just kept picturing Hong Kong as a ping pong ball, where China's like, we don't want you, and then the British are like, we want you, but no, we don't want you tomorrow, and then so I was busy.
That's fine. Well, the question is, what was it like seeing the history of that diving into that place?
Okay, let's talk about rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was in so many rabbit holes. Ali Parker would know. It's just once you get into a rabbit hole, I think I was researching a wheelchair from 1940s for 3 days straight. And what do I use in the book? Just the shape of the wheel. Did I waste 3 days? I actually want to talk a little bit about the research for specifically the women's voices in this book, because I struggled so much to find local Chinese women's voices of the time. And it wasn't really because that they were illiterate or anything like that. It was just, most of the time they weren't in a position to record history. And when I think about my grandmother growing up, she's very much it's in the past, don't worry about it. We don't have to talk about it. And I think that carries through then with why I want to tell this story so much. So researching took so long because I couldn't find my grandmother's voice in the archives. I could find British, Australian, Canadian, American women's voices when they were interned in camps in Hong Kong. So they were writing in their diary every day of what was happening. So through those women, I could kind of get this sense of what was happening in Hong Kong. But then I still couldn't find the Chinese woman voice. And I actually still couldn't until 2015 on YouTube. The South China Morning Post, they put out this video where they actually interviewed a now elderly woman who was actually part of the East River Column resistance. And I remember watching it and I cried. I was like, oh my gosh, there's the voice. In many ways, the research is very hard, but it's so worth it.
I was going to say, we were talking beforehand, I was kind of feeling a bit of a spiritual connection to another amazing book which came out last year called The Butterfly Women by Madeline Cleary, which talked about missing women's historical perspectives in colonial Victoria. And I was going to say, the actual title of this book comes from a Chinese proverb, which is, when sleeping women wake, mountains move. And there's a fantastic line in this book which says, men may have started this war, but let's ensure that women help to end it. So, and the great thing is that you also show how involved they were, particularly with Tsiang and Biu, being involved in the resistance in one way or another. And it's just, I'm just happy that I know that this happened in a strange way, and that this story actually shines a light on something that isn't talked about in history and that should be talked about in history. And it shows that history is not one page, it's a kaleidoscope of different voices.
I think a lot of historical books I read also growing up, like you could actually kind of get a feel for what was happening through the men's stories and voices, but the women's voices are always like missing. So I love the fact that we have authors, you know, I'm just pointing because you're here, sorry, like Ali Parker and then Madeline Cleary, you were saying, writing these stories, because I mean, I read Madeline's book and I learned so much. I had no idea that, just please go read it. Oh, yeah, it's really good. So I think focusing then on the women's interior voices was really important to me with this.
Ad break time, stop the podcast. Hey everyone, just thought I'd stop to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Podpixels, the Trent Dalton of professional podcast platforms. Question, do you have a desire for a great podcast? How are you going to build it? What about the design work? Won't it cost a fortune? Fear not, for Podpixels is a simple, done-for-you website service built specifically for podcasts. They are here to deliver that professional look to your podcast to make it easier for listeners to find your show, and all for one great monthly price. From hobbyists to pros, Podpixels has you covered. Their team provides domains, website hosting, backup, security, and support, handling the full setup and making sure that your show is up to date and allowing you to focus on what you do best, podcast. With Podpixels, you can achieve your full podcasting vision. They are the ultimate one-stop solution for anyone looking to build an online home for their podcast. Check them out below in the show notes and tell them that Nick from Date with a Day Boo sent you. Thank you, Podpixels, for sponsoring the show. We'll now touch on some kind of overlapping themes that we kind of noticed when we were diving into each other's books. And one of the big ones that kind of came up for us was the danger of place. I love examining place whenever we talk about books, but also the idea of resilience and family bonds, which you guys bring a different interpretation to these themes so well in each of your books. And starting with danger of place, Sam, I want to go to you first.
Hello.
Because you've got this town of Brolet. There's a couple of great scenes with Dahlia and Fowler where Fowler asks the question, what kind of town is Brolet? And like her first thoughts, I love that she says, it's multifaceted. Some might even be positive. She describes it as a battleground at some points as well. But I think the best way I can describe it with these two warring views is that it's a powder keg filling with gunpowder, and any match, all it needs is a match to set it off. Talk to me about Brolet and this town and creating danger in place.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think in terms of anywhere, any size town, any sort of the amount of people that you get together, no matter what, there's always going to be people that have these diametrically opposed sort of views, and they're charismatic enough to get other people to follow them fanatically, where they're going to, essentially go off and potentially kill other people in the name of this cause or this person's, furthering their interest. So I think that sort of as a microcosm, Brolet worked for that. And I think then there's also sort of this attachment of like a sense of ownership of a place or terrain, and I think that's what also kind of increases the danger as well, because that can be particularly within bushfire circumstances with failing to evacuate a property, that can then lead to, well, I don't want to leave because this is my home, and I'm willing to take on 100-foot wall of fire with a bucket of sand and some hoses. So that's a personal attachment to a place. But in terms of the battleground, that can be kind of amplified by that. So people can say, okay, well, this is our land, and that's obviously, being in Australia, that's highly debatable as to the ownership of land. But in terms of the I think what I was trying to do with the Brolet atmosphere was having people that are charismatic enough to have people that then take up their cause, which is entirely questionable as to who's in the right. And then when you've got enough people to do that, that's when you can start having a battleground, because that's when people are willing to die for a cause that they wholly fanatically believe in, even within the sort of small town of where you assume there's more of a communal sort of aspect to it, of everyone sort of knowing each other and getting along. I think regardless of, even if you have that sort of veneer of a community in crisis in a small communal town, you could still have people that are willing to kill each other or get into a potentially deadly situation because they have fully drank the Kool-Aid of someone in a position of power.
ownership of place creates power, which really can drive people mad in some way. And I mean, Emma, it's a perfect transition over to Hong Kong and its many bouncing back and forth, like you say, because your book is divided into 4 or 5 parts. And the first part you show life under British rule and then Japanese occupation. I love the contrast that you present from this part over to all of the other parts, because it's the first part we have Mingzhu with the family set up with Wei, who he straddles kind of Chinese tradition and also that British mindset of living in there. He strives for that British lifestyle, but he also wants to perform ancestral rites, which Mingzhu finds so contradictory. And then he even has that British mindset of underestimating Japan's military capabilities as well, which then flips when Japan invades, and suddenly you find these 3 amazing women they have to respond and deal and manage and find ways to survive in an environment where the threat is so big and so present.
I find it interesting, like, yeah, Wei is a dickhead. Sorry, this is recorded, isn't it? Yeah, he is. What I actually found really interesting about writing Wei is that I was drawing a lot from my dad. So I'll share a little bit. So I was born and raised in the UK, and so my dad, like, he's like 2nd generation UK. So he actually grew up with this mindset of like, the British are like really powerful, like the royal family, like you should look up to them. Like when Princess Diana died, he cried, and I was like, oh, who was she to us? You know? I mean, I was sad too, but it's all those little things you don't realise, you know. I was like, oh, I didn't realise you were so invested in that, Dad, because like all the practices we were like doing at home were like, we were, you know, burning the incense for our gods and doing all the Chinese New Year festivities, and we were very traditional. So I drew a lot of him from Wei from my dad. But then during research, I also found how many people actually in Hong Kong thought that they were safe. You know, it was like, oh, you know, we're safe in Hong Kong because, you know, we're under British rule, like they won't leave us, like they will protect us. Yeah, okay, for like a hot second, and then they ran away. They were like, okay, we're leaving you, we can't be bothered right now, we're busy in Europe, and they kind of left us out to dry. Yeah.
It's so interesting. And then when you're dealing with the Japanese occupation, which is just so, like, I'm amazed how the characters navigate it, and it's so brilliantly done, and it's so present and in the moment. By comparison, Huan, with your story, kind of, I think when I was thinking about the danger of place, I really kind of gravitated towards Yuan, because he has escaped from a military dictatorship in Montevideo. He's kind of past it. He has had a bit of time to think about it, but he's been exposed to a new environment, which is Western Sydney. And he's developed this very, you kind of, the name that you kind of described it, the silent, just in
Culture of silence.
The culture of silence. He's very pragmatic about his approach to living in Western Sydney. It's a melting pot. There is a community. Of course, there's people from South America all around, but there's also the feeling of being an outsider. You're also not in South America, and then you're also dealing with the casual racism in Australian society. There's a great quote from Yuan where he says, Greeks, Turks, Latinos, Macedonians, we all work together. Here we are all the same. Wogs, here to work. And there's even a generational element as well with Betty, where a moment later in the story where she kind of goes, I just wanted my family to blend into Australia. That's what I wanted. I wanted to just blend into this place and not celebrate their differences. This family has such an interesting relationship with the place of Australia specifically, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. That's really important in the book, how people relate to place. And it's also probably a good time to think about this family came from a danger of place in that they were in a military dictatorship. So they left there and they've come to Australia. And Australia's just got rid of the White Australia policy. So we don't actually know how welcome they are either, because that's something they're going to have to navigate too. But yeah, they're definitely on the outside, because it is the danger of the unknown. What does the unknown hold? And when you don't know that creates a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of dread, and having to navigate that world. And also for Juan, having to depend on his daughter so much. Like, you're no longer, it's like it shifts the relationship in families, because it gives a lot of power to the children when the children, and it takes a lot of power away from the parents. I think that's, is that what you...
Yeah, it's true because the children have such a closer connection because they've spent more time in Australia and they've been more exposed to that kind of melting pot environment, whereas the Whitecunas, the comparison of contrast.
Yeah,
and this actually leads quite nicely into the whole idea of family bonds and resilience, which we kind of all identified. And Emma, for your story, I mean, resilience is a major part of Mingzhu, her story. I think each one of them are kind of finding that way to be themselves in their own way, kind of pursuing resilience. I think, for me, Jiang was the one I really gravitated towards in her journey, you know, becoming a major part of the resistance. I will not spoil it. There is a kind of a will they, won't they with one of the characters. That it was so interesting when they finally confess their feelings to her, because it's so later in the story and she has kind of had this moment. She's been in wartime occupied Hong Kong for so many years. She's gone from a child to a woman. She's had to grow up fast and she's had to develop this resilience fast. So when this unrequited love is finally put to her, she goes, I've grown past this. I don't even know where I sit with you anymore. It was such an interesting, I love that particular moment because it reflects her growth into who she has become as a person. It's a great story. I have no question here to say. But talk to me about resilience there.
Thank you for the he's just complimenting us non-stop.
The books are great.
Let's keep going. Let's keep going. I love love stories. So I love love. That's so lame. I love love. I love unrequited love as well in stories, because I think having lived in different countries and created lots of different friendships and fallen in and out of love, I've noticed that a lot of the times unrequited love it comes in many forms, and distance and place always plays a role in why two people might not ever get to be with one another. So I always love looking into those kind of relationships. And then but with Tiang, in this particular moment, I think because she had grown up, what I really loved about exploring that was it was mirroring my own life at the time. So my partner's here, but he knows the story, so it's fine. I was super in love with this one guy for many years since high school, but I thought it was love, right? So and we lived in different countries. It was the distance. It never worked out. But actually, one day I realized I just had outgrown this idea of him and what I thought he could give me. And so I kind of bestowed that into Tiang when she said I move on,
Also on the topic of family, I want to talk about Biyu a lot, because Biyu is a maid who is charged with looking after Mingzhu and Tiang, but she doesn't feel like she's part of this unit. She's very much viewed as an equal. I believe Mingzhu refers to her as the sister of my soul very early on in this book. And I love the fact that even in that dynamic, which we see in the start of the book, where you have a family in British occupied Hong Kong, but still kind of following that traditional route of Chinese family dynamics, this maid is regarded as an equal. And there's a whole other subtext around whether do you want to stay as a maid? Do you want to be part of this as well? Tell me about Biyu, because I think she's kind of a good crux to talk about family in your story.
I love that you think she's a good crux in the story, because Biyu is actually inspired by my grandmother, who inspired this whole novel. So thank you again for the compliment. So with Biyu, I kind of wanted to channel all of my grandmother's personality traits into her. And one of the things growing up in Hong Kong as well, when I was also teaching English in Hong Kong, I noticed that a lot of the kids that were coming into schools never came with their mums. They always came with the helpers. And in Hong Kong, we have this society where, parents have loads of kids, but then they go to work. So who's looking after the kids? It's these helpers that, you hire from Indonesia or the Philippines. And I realized that there was this bond between this child and this helper, and that was such a mother-child bond. So it made me realize my perception of what the help was growing up in the UK. It just changed when I finally moved to Hong Kong. Then I saw relationships between the parents and the helpers were it was like they were a family. It was strange to me. So that's why I wanted to explore that too, is making sure Biyu was loved. I think my whole book is about just love in general, even with the mum being a nice Chinese mum. That's rare in fiction, right? So yeah, and I made sure to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Alejandra, a good place to talk about resilience and family in your story is also a good relationship that develops between Juan and Frances, who's a First Nations woman. They're on the other side of a long journey, and for me, this is resilience recognizing resilience. You know, when we talk about Juan, he talks a lot about how he came to Australia and he just wanted to get his family out of Uruguay in that scenario. And there's such a sad but beautiful scene where Frances talks about her past, how her mother was a member of the Stolen Generation. And she talks about the impact that had on her entire life. And then it makes Juan actually think of a massacre in 1831, the Sosipuedas massacre, where in Uruguay, where women and children were forced to become servants of the Spanish. And he has this beautiful line which says, imperialism is the same all over the world. They're products of a difficult past, both of them are, and yet they recognise each other and develop something incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I think they do have a lot of similarities. I had to be really careful writing the character of Frances too, because she's a First Nations woman, so I didn't want to speak in her voice. And when I did have that, I did have someone do a cultural sensitivity report as well before I published the book, obviously, because it was an area that I wanted to be very careful about and sensitive how I approach that. But they've both grown up in poverty, so they've both got that in common. They've both grown up during a similar time, one in Uruguay, the other one has grown up in Australia, but both during difficult times in families that were struggling. And then they had to go through a lot. They've both gone through a lot of loss. They've both lost language, they've lost culture, so both of them, they can identify in what they have lost, and I think that brings them together too. And the similarities, like one can see that imperialism is the same all over, like people are colonised and killed, children are stolen, and that happened in lots of countries in South America as well as in Australia. Even in South America, that happened right up to the 1970s when for example, during the dictatorships, a lot of the women that were taken prisoners and disappeared and were pregnant, their children were stolen. They gave birth and the children were given to friends of the regime, so people that supported the regime as well. So that was very common, and many of those children still have not been found. You've probably heard of the abuelas de Plaza de Mayo that are looking for their grandchildren in Argentina. Yeah. I think I went off.
That's okay. It's just a great example of examining of resilience, but also finding family within that. Because also Lola herself, she's dealing with difficult family dynamics and difficult family relations as well. She's got a son she's very disconnected from as well, and she's a husband that she struggles to connect with. She's kind of been taught and given the value of family, but it seems enough. And her story, I think, is also particularly touching in this story as well, because she learns to discover and love herself a little bit more, and that she can only help be with her family if she also cares and looks after herself too.
Yeah, and that's also a story of resilience too, because someone that lives with a mental illness can steal years of your life. And I think that's what's happened to Lola in the story, and that it takes her this long to be able to then find herself, have the courage to be who she is. And that's an ongoing process for everyone. I think as we get older, we're looking for who we really are, and this can change as we age too. But I think for her in particular, the resilience is moving beyond that what she clung to. Like, she just clung so much to the culture and family because that was who she was, her identity, and that mixed in with mental illness in the works, and then it's even harder to break free from who am I? What do I really want in life?
It's so fascinating. Sam, by comparison, I know I put you on the spot there, didn't I? Like, resilience and family take on all sorts of twisted mindsets in your book. Like, Dahlia is such a resilient soul, and I kind of understood why she kind of struggles to play by the rules a little bit, is because she's been down such a dark path with this town that she doesn't want anyone to repeat the mistakes that she has made. I found her really connecting with Harlow quite a bit as well, because Harlow kind of feels like she's at the start of the journey that Dahlia has actually kind of been on. She's been down this road. Of course, we won't go into spoilers, but family takes on a very strange place here, because you've also got the Rockfords family as well. and then this cult cleansing light, which the community refers to as Crispies. The Crispies as well. Like the comparison of that, of their compound is, you put a comparison of the Hills Have Eyes in there as well. Like, where does family and resilience sit in the town, in this town, and in this world?
It's a really good question. I think that family, particularly, I think there's a comment in Hayes at one point. I think Fowler, the older detective, and Dahlia are driving along somewhere, and I think she mentions about Dahlia says something about her family being messed up, and I think Fowler kind of quips something like, "Show me an Aussie family that's not," which I think is accurate. Is accurate. And I think it's weird. I mean, like we're been here, and descended from convicts, and I think that the ties to the land and all this sort of thing, there's been wars and all this, but then it's kind of like led to this sort of situation where I think that it's caused a lot of problems and dysfunctions within families, and yet they still seemingly endure or want to aspire to continue to endure and retain something of a familial mold, like the kind of like nuclear family, these sort of places that were romanticized, these sort of like ideas of the nuclear family from the 50s or whatever, and wanting to sort of retain that, when in actuality, particularly within, and this, I mean, I wrote this book, but like Dahlia's family, at least within the scope of this and what we're talking about, I think is pretty dysfunctional. It might be a sort of situation where you kind of like shake each other's hands and say, we've given this a red hot go, but maybe we should like, go on our respective paths and never refer to each other as the Turner family again, kind of thing. But that being said, there's still this Australian, whatever that is, mindset of wanting to retain the family mold and to do what we can to sort of to retain that however we can. That also can lead to hardships, but it can also lead to moments of beauty as well. And I'd like to think that there's at least a couple in there of Hayes in a book that does immediately have a lot of trauma and a lot of disturbing individuals and a lot of violence in it. But I think that there is moments of rare beauty, and I think that is the case in sort of any family unit as well. Which, not overlooking the fact that can be dysfunctional, but there can be still moments of rare beauty in this sort of indelible quest to retain the family mold, I think. I don't know. At least that's what I was kind of trying to play around with.
Families are complicated and confusing and all sorts of things. Needless to say, these 3 books are absolutely amazing. I could honestly talk to you guys all day about it, but I also want to talk into myth busting. Let's talk about this journey to publication that you both sort of had. Hey everyone, Nick here. I'm excited to announce that I have launched a brand new book newsletter featuring book reviews, recommendations, latest news from the publishing world, opinion pieces, short stories, and more. 1 monthly newsletter, no spam, just the good book stuff. The sort of email you're glad shows up in your inbox. Sign up now for free, and for a small additional monthly fee, get early access to Date with a Debut episodes and exclusive content, including special extra episodes with our guests, Second Date, where they run another gauntlet of rapid-fire questions. Subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes below. Kind of had a bit of a roundtable discussion before this event and talked about particular things that we want to talk about, and I have a question that I want to pose to kind of each of you in terms of particular topics and discussions. And Emma, I want to kind of start with you, because when we were talking about this, you talked about the idea of rejection and handling rejection. So what was your experience to deal with the process of rejection within the publishing space?
Oh man, it sucks. I don't know, if you want to be a writer, you do need thick skin, because you're going to get rejected a lot. Literally just eating it for breakfast, like, yeah, I got another rejection today, hun. And like trying not to cry 24/7. But I actually want to, going back to the YA manuscript, that won like a mentorship prize with Allen and Unwin several years ago. And so they were like, oh, this is great, Emma, like you should definitely pursue it. And I was like, so do you want it then? And they're like, oh no, we don't. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Moving on. So I remember submitting that to several agents. And one of the rejections that I got, they basically said love the story and the voice, but I already have an agent author I'm representing next year. And I mean, I have this email in black and white, so I'm saving it for a rainy day. But I was just shocked, because I've been getting rejections, and that is not a problem, right? It's like, yeah, okay, here we go again. But getting one that was, especially written for me about race, I think I cried. I was very upset for like almost 3 months. I can hold a grudge. It was like 3 months where I didn't want to write and I didn't want to do anything. And then just after 3 months, Mingju appeared. In my thoughts, I was at work at the bookstore selling, books by Ali Parker and Cadence Bell, and I was just like, "Oh, Mingju, yeah, I think she's calling. I should go back to this book." So I poured absolutely everything in like the early parts of my 30s, like back into this book, and then I submitted it. And this time, I got 5 agent offers in 2 weeks.
Boom.
So yeah.
Yeah, I reckon that deserves a round of applause.
Can I just add something to what Emma is saying? I think that's really important because on top of the rejection, you're also, you get the rejection like every other writer gets, but then you also get the rejection as the other because there's already we've already got, Latin Americans, didn't they want Latin American stories for years? I don't know what happened there, but anyway, but you do get that, you get that added rejection as well. So it does, it's difficult. It's difficult, because then, you're thinking, am I getting rejected for this, for that, like how many other things?
But also the audacity to give me the reason. It's like, just say no, move on with your day.
There's actually a question I actually want to ask you, Alejandra, about on the back of that, because obviously books don't happen in isolation. Of course, the author's name on it, but there's editors, there's designers, there's all sorts that get involved with it. And of course, you've lived this life and experience as well. What was kind of the development? How did the book change in terms of, voices, bringing in that Uruguayan perspective, kind of interpretations, as it were, with the creation of your book?
I don't think the book changed in terms of the voices and the perspective, but what did change was the structure a little bit. I had the shock when I worked with a mentor she said, no, you've got to get rid of all that. It's going to start, you try starting here. So you're half your book's gone and you're sort of, okay. And then you're starting again. I think that, that definitely happened. Is that... What else are you saying? Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It'd be so interesting to hear kind of like because what happened with that period of time. Obviously, it's not a universal experience. Everyone's experience when dealing with something like trying to get out of a military dictatorship in the 1970s. I'd imagine that experiences would be different in such a loaded environment, and the stories that came out of it would be as well. Yeah,
and I think for that, a lot of it was based on my own family story, and then obviously changed and added. The character of Juan definitely had, bits of my own father as well through it, although he would never go and find a partner after his wife died. That was not him. So it did change in that way, and I think, It's a really difficult story to tell because you want to say it in a way that's accessible to Australian audiences as well. So you've got to be, I think, really how you tell that story is you want it to be authentic, but at the same time it needs to be accessible too. And I think I tried to do that in a way, to get people to come in to the story. And then what you want is people just to stop and reflect and think, oh, how does that affect me, or how do I relate to that? Because I think it's really important when you're writing to leave space for your readers, and your readers to make their own idea of, or all of you to make your own idea of what do you think of this, or how would I relate to this, or I think that's really important. I wanted to include all characters that were flawed, like in real life, as people are flawed. So they're all got issues. They're all flawed. And they're all telling from their perspective. Yeah,
and it's interesting because you went obviously through a small publisher with Puncher and Wattmann. By comparison, Sam, you got hello again. You got picked up by Pan Macmillan Australia, one of the big publishers. Was there? Yeah, was there what was kind of your experience by comparison? Was there anything in from your experience with a big publisher that you didn't know about?
First of all, just with the preface of that as well. So I've been doing it since I'm 30. I'm 38 this year. I'm 38 in August for birthday presents when you want to get that. But so I've been doing it. So I started when I was about 17, 18. Moved over to pretty much finished my HSC. Got a job at P&O Cruises. I was supposed to not name it because I was doing the wrong thing. But anyway, so I got a job at P&O Cruises. Started writing when I was about 17, 18. Wrote a romance Mills & Boon type novel, Intimate Internet, which didn't get picked up, unfortunately. The world wasn't ready for that. Anyway, I went through 20 years, wrote about 10, 11, 12 novels that are never going to see the light of day. Thank goodness for that, because they, no one should be made to suffer through those. Whole time I was doing that, I was sending out, trying to get published. None of it was good. And like what Emma had said as well, in terms of the rejection from that was, you you will get thousands. You will get thousands. I got thousands. And it's like, the less you know, like you said, with like just saying a simple no. Oh, what a kindness that is, rather than this person being like, I'll go you one better, and this is why you suck, and this is why you should never ever write again, and just really like go out of their way to really making sure that you don't pick up a pad and a pen again. I know that you guys would have gotten the same sort of thing as well, particularly when race is brought into it. So that sort of thing was the outset, and what kind of happened. Sorry, Nick, in a long-winded way, trying to get up to what we're talking about. Is I got a job just before COVID struck. I got a job. I worked for a major media entity, which is the most toxic place that's ever existed in the history of mankind, and I was writing there the entire time. And anyway, I got this job at a streaming platform that was an extension of it. So from that, you can probably deduce where I was working, but I won't name it because I'm pretty sure I've got an NDA. That's not exactly watertight, but anyway, and. So I got this job, and then I got horrifically bullied there by a psychopathic manager. It was pretty bad stuff, and I wrote a novel about that. Sent that out everywhere. That got rejected everywhere. The literary agent I had at the time was very, very free with copying and pasting stuff that the commissioning editors were sending to her, probably under understanding that it was for her eyes only, but she was sending it straight to me, being like, here's what they fucking reckon, and they're not loving it and stuff like that. So I was really, 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 really devastated. So when I started writing Haze, like I was at a period where kind of like it was the closest I'd ever come to giving up. Like that's how bad it was. I've been doing it for so long, got all these rejections and sort of stuff like that. So I started writing Haze because I was like, well, Haze is like, it's going to make me fall back in love with writing. It's, it's action driven and all that sort of stuff. It's never going to get published. It's too dark. It's too violent. So, I'll just have fun with writing this sort of thing. And then based on that is when I got a new literary agent. And then based on the literary agent starting to send it around, that's when it went to publishers, and several expressed interest and all this sort of thing. And the whole time that's going on, and I'm not sure about your experience, but the whole time that was going on, for me, I was just like, oh, yeah. Like, I'll believe it when I say it. I believe it when I say it. Once I walk into a bookshop, this is what I used to say, once I walk into a bookshop and I see it there, then maybe then I'll get excited. But not before then. And long story short, now here we are. So that was my experience with trying to get published about 20 cheeky years.
Yeah, just a clap.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So, as a last segment before we open up the floor to a couple of questions, because I know we are running out of time, there was one thing that we all came to an agreement on at the end of this segment, which is to smash a motto that you often get taught when you are writing, when you want to become a writer. And now it's the chance for us to do it. Emma, what's the motto we want to debunk, or that a piece of advice that you get as a writer?
It's
open to everyone.
At me, writers. When people say to you like, "Oh, show don't tell, don't tell," I'm like, "You show, I'm telling." I don't know. I'm such a huge purple prose writer, so the whole show don't tell thing, it's like, go buy another book and read that.
Smash, show, don't tell, basically. The long and the short of it.
I show a little bit, but like, I don't know. I love reading books that are very purple prosy. I always have. It's just the way I do it.
Yeah, they were spot on there. I was going to say, show, don't tell, whatever they're saying about that, ignore that shit. Yeah. But the one I'd probably say, actually, and like this one's probably pretty highly contested as well, is writing every day. I don't know if I actually believe in that. I think that write a lot. You're going to have to write a lot. Read a lot, obviously, as well. But this writing an everyday thing, I think that kind of like starts to not necessarily take the passion out of it, but becomes this laborious thing, which it just sucks all the fun out of it. And you need to like retain that fun, because you're going to be torturing yourself no matter what. So you got to have that little glimmer, just that little modicum of fun to keep it going. So I'd say, I don't know about this writing everyday business kind of thing, but that's just me.
I think you have to write because you love it as well. I think that's really important, because you can't be thinking, I'm going to be publishing this at the end. I think you write because you love it,
100%.
And then hopefully you get published. That's the idea. But you have to write because you love it, because you do spend a lot of time at the desk by yourself, so it is a bit. So you've really got to like what you're doing.
True words.
Enjoy your characters. I had lots of fun, especially writing Juan. That was such a fun character to write.
Truer words have never been spoken. Well, I know we're running out of time, so we'll open the opportunity for about 2 or 3 questions. Does anyone have any questions they would like to put to our wonderful panel?
Mine's a quick one. Is there like a secret to getting an agent? Because I've heard like without an agent you can't get published. Is there some magic? Is there just...
There's no magic in this business. Sorry, there's publicists sitting in here. There is magic. there is. No, I think we are now in a time where I actually want to debunk this too, where people are like, oh, in order to be an author, you have to be traditionally published. I do not believe in that crap. I think you can self-publish. It's really, really hard work though. Like obviously you're not going to get publicists and you're not going to get the marketing team, but to be very honest, as a woman of colour, you might not even get that anyway if you got traditionally published. So I don't think an agent is, but I do with Hachette, I'm just saying. I do, I get everything with Hachette. But I think you don't need an agent, but I do think that the way you get an agent needs to change, because I think what I did when I was younger was like, I'll just send it out to like 1,000 agents. But then with this book, I only sent it to 10 or 11 agents, and I got to the point where I was like stalking them on their Facebooks. So I knew they were married, I knew if they had kids. I was like, are we gonna vibe? Like, you know, because whoever I get, I want to know we can become family one day. So so when you do try to look for an agent, please be very picky, because it's like dating. Whoever you pick, like, you're going to want to like. That's the only advice I have.
I will just add on to... Sorry, I was just going to add on to that just really briefly. So agents are, like most people in the industry, they're overworked and underpaid. So they've got like so many people, like they're like, you know, like the trope of the Hollywood agent going and trying to get, you know, go to the toilet and someone sliding a manuscript or a screenplay under the door of the toilet. But the good thing about that is that it's never been an easier time, and there's so many ways in which you can officially go through channels to get FaceTime with them. So one of the best ways is through the Australian Society of Authors has a literary speed dating. If you've never heard of that before, it's an absolutely fantastic sort of program that you can do. The time will fly, because I think it's like 2 or 3 minutes where you just got to talk and push the limits of human endurance of speaking. But hopefully it's a really good way that you can connect with literary agents. So it's never been a better time. So definitely check out the Australian Society of Authors. It's a really good thing.
Got time for one more question?
I had a quick question, hopefully. For all the kind of budding authors here, how different is your published novel to your first draft, and why?
Great question. I love that one. Alejandra, do you want to go first with this one?
Well, yeah, as I said, I did have to take quite a lot of out and then start again. But then when I worked on it quite hard, so then when it got to the publishing state, I actually, like the publisher said, that it doesn't need a structural edit, it was fine. So I think it's just spending that time on it. And it is really, for me, what happened was winning the Newcastle Writers Festival prize was really great, because then I had the money to actually pay a mentor, and that was really useful. So someone else to look at it, and yeah, just other eyes on it before you start sending it off to publishers. Yeah. And I don't have an agent.
You can go.
Okay. Yeah. So in terms of Haze, I mean, it was pretty different. There was a married at first sight element that was really important that I did not want to get rid of, you know. And I fought tooth and nail for that. No, I didn't really fight tooth and nail. It was about shit. But there was that, and there was also, you know, Dali got to meet a lion and a burning zoo and all this sort of stuff. So all these sort of elements, like so. And I'm a terrible overwriter, terrible overwriter. So like the first manuscript that got submitted, it was like 180,000 words or something, you know. So, and now the next one I'm working on now is a lean like 210. So, you know, getting that down. So they do change a lot, at least in my experience. Yeah, I don't know. Emma, what about you?
I don't think a novel is ever finished, even when it's published. I think when I look at my book now, I'm like, oh fuck, I should have done this. Or I read a section, I'm like, oh no, why? It's too late, it's already published. So when I do look at my like earlier versions of my drafts, actually I don't. they're at home and they'll stay just on that shelf and collect dust, and then I'll burn it one day. But I have to say, one of the things for me was agency for my female characters, because I started this book when I was 21 years old. I'm 38. We're both 38. Hey. Yeah.
I'm not saying that.
And I think one of the things for me was, as I was developing these 3 female characters, the turning point was when I got into my 30s. I realised the shift in agency that these women had, and the mindset. Suddenly I wasn't writing as a 21-year-old me where I didn't know much. I was writing as a 30-something-year-old me that really, really fucking hated the patriarchy and was ready for a fight. So then that was very different, and the voice came out in that way.
That's a great question. I wish we had time for so many more, but unfortunately we have run out of time. I want to wish a very warm thank you to Alejandra, Sam, and Emma for joining me today.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much. If you enjoyed this discussion, let the Newcastle Writers Festival know. You can check it out on all the socials. Use the hashtag NWF2026. If you have another question, we're literally going straight to an author signing table after this, so you can come directly and ask those questions as well. And if you enjoyed this chat, you can check it out, Date with a Debut on podcast. It's hosted by myself, Nick Wasiliev. Listen wherever you get your podcasts. And before we go, I would like to offer one special thank you to all the amazing volunteers who make this festival possible. Thank you so much. Enjoy the remainder of the Newcastle Writers Festival. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Date with a Debut, and for listening to the Words and Nerds channel. You can buy all books mentioned in today's episode down in the description box, and if you enjoyed the show, drop us a review, leave us 5 stars or a thumbs up wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hear episodes when they drop, be sure to subscribe to Words and Nerds, or you can subscribe to Date with a Debut on Podbean to hear the latest episodes as they drop. This episode was edited and produced by myself, Nick Wasiliev. Additional production credits to Dani V from Words and Nerds, music by Sakura HZ, and thanks to the publishers and authors who make this show possible. This show is sponsored by Podpixels. Date with a Debut is a Words and Nerds and Breathe Art podcast co-production recorded and edited on the lands of the Awabakal people.